Welcome back to Track Talk. This will be a continuation of our exploration of 1871, The Old Prince. When you're starting this game, it's important to identify the short line and the main line. You can determine their relative value and map presence. And then, of course, also to look at the privates each player has been distributed. So the short line in this game is going to be the Georgetown. Georgetown is here in the eastern portion of the map. And then the main line, interestingly, is going to be the Alberton, which is not the most exciting of companies. So we'll see how the players decide to navigate that. If we look at this, Jean is going to have the short line concession, Railcar Ferry, which is an exchange share, not an exchange share, but comes with a share of the Alberton. Hunslet, interesting private, gives you a ability to buy a train. Union Bank, one of the most important privates in the game, I would say, most warping the game state. And then a peer share. Merchants & Co. is going with Marius. This is an exchange for one of the short line shares. Charlottetown, shipbuilding, another exchange, and then peer. And then finally, Cosette is going to have a peer, Royal Agriculture Society, which I believe comes with mainline, Alberton, peer, the mainline concession, and then Schreiber and Burpee. So let's see how they get this auction started. Jean will be the first up and will offer the Union Bank right off the bat. This is the private that we were mentioning is pretty powerful. Definitely can warp the game state and really change the way you want to play. The player that owns the Union Bank is really just playing for time and trying to drag things out. Sometimes doesn't even get to run a company. So we'll see if these players bid for it. Definitely, I mean, at least in my opinion, definitely worth at least face. Probably worth a little bit over face for sure. Marius goes to 125, Cosette 130, and it goes for just 135. Seems on the cheaper side, not an unreasonable bid at all. Probably happy to take it for just 135. Marius will go back and offer the Vernon Bridge. I think one of the advantages of offering the Union Bank early is that you can hope to force a bidding war for it, since people still have a relatively undefined game state. They haven't locked up liquidity yet. So maybe if you have two players that are interested in that, they'll bid higher than they would later in the auction. But in this case, they really didn't go very high. They didn't take the bait. Vernon Bridge, nice company. Really kind of locks down the Charlottetown's prospects east, at least through the early game. So if you are not the Charlottetown president, you may be a little bit disincentivized from trading the share and opening up the track for the Charlottetown. On the other hand, if you get this private, maybe you can feel a little more secure that you will eventually end up with the Charlottetown because the other players will recognize that little disincentive. And also just a cheap private, nice to have for a share, an exchange share. Cosette goes for 45, Jean 50, and it goes up to 65. So if we just compare the relative expense of the Vernon Bridge versus the Union Bank, you can see how the Union Bank seems to be a little bit undervalued with that 135 bid. Cosette puts up the main line, another expensive private early. Same logic, I think, for putting up the Union Bank early is just try and get it to go for a lot. That said, Alberton is really kind of a dog of a company. I would not be surprised if nobody is excited about this mainline concession. John is going to bid 165 for it. Marius joining him and actually is being bid up a little bit and goes up to 195. It does come with two shares at 92, so always reasonable to throw at least one or two bids on it so that you can get the $180 of value from those shares. We're back to Jean. He's going to put up the short line. So kind of all the big privates coming out early here. Georgetown, a little bit better map position than Alberton. Murray River and Georgetown, I kind of tend to conflate with one another. They just seem to be in similar locations. They both have kind of unexciting locations, can get caught in this center choke point. I suppose Georgetown has a little bit of an advantage in potentially getting to the offboard and the Surrey start location, whereas Murray River has some offboards down here. So anyway, back to the Georgetown. Marius is bidding on it. Cosette's going to join him. And it goes up for 190. So I think that was almost as expensive as the Alberton, but I'd much rather have the, yeah, it's only $5 less. I'd much rather have the Georgetown than the Alberton. All right, we'll see if the short line floats early or if there's a little bit of a stall there. Putting up shipbuilding, so this is a Georgetown share. And now, if you are the short line president, you may very well be interested in at least one of these shares and just trying to protect your presidency. Cosette already has a pretty cheap exchange, so it doesn't have to worry about someone double exchanging and then buying a share and stealing that presidency. She's going to bid on it. Jean is contesting it and wins it for 100. Okay. Cosette puts up Schreiber and Burpee, the only straight track in the early phases of the game, for most of the game, I should say. Goes up for 110. Decent revenue on that. I think that's the real reason you'd bid on it, unless there's a very situational strategy you're taking. It's really just the $30 of revenue that you're bidding on. Hunslet, this is a pet private of mine. I'm a big fan of it. I think that the utility of being able to have your train rust and then not fall back is quite high, especially if you're trying to run far to the right and then split as a means of recapitalizing your company. It unfortunately does not buy the train for you, unlike some other privates and other titles, but it does prevent you from falling back. And then being able to loot it for $200 is pretty powerful as well. Gives you a big injection of liquidity in the mid game, pick up 2-3 shares potentially, get an early share lead. Just need to be careful that you have a way to get that money back into the company at some point, because you will be stuck on the conveyor belt of trains and have to buy trains with company cash at some point. So anyway, I think it's a pretty flexible private. I'm a big fan of it. We'll see what it goes for. Marius goes for 115 up to 120. Seems like a reasonable price, maybe a little bit underpriced. Merchants & Co. is up now, very similar to the Vernon Bridge, just doesn't have the blocker associated with it. Cosette's bidding for 55 and then passes it to John for 60. So Cosette is sitting on a bunch of cash. Nobody has put up any peer shares yet, and several of these players have quite a bit of cash, so I don't know if we're going to see any of these peer shares, anybody avoiding or dodging these peer shares by spending cash. All the privates went for pretty cheap. Cosette's putting up the Royal Agriculture Society. Jean 115. He is the mainline president, so maybe interested in a few more shares. Marius overbidding him and wins it for 120. John offering Railcar. And that is, I believe, the final company or share for the main line. Marius bids 125. He just won the last one. Does he want to spend a bunch of money on this one too? That would potentially put him out of the running for these peer shares, which may be his intention. Cosette goes to 130. Marius, not going to be overbid, takes it for 135 and now has $80 left. So he will end up with one of these shares. I imagine it'll be the Murray River, but we'll see if the other players give him the Charlottetown. And Cosette's passing. Jean actually bids for it. That's interesting. Why would Jean bid for that? Murray River, he's got main line all the way out here. I'm not really sure. I don't see a whole lot of synergy there. It's also not a particularly low number, so if he gets in a tie, it's not going to help him maintain control of the pier. He does have the number 1, so if he gets that forced on him, maybe he hopes 2 shares will give him control. I'm not sure. I probably would have passed there and then probably taken the Charlottetown. But he gets it for 85. Cosette's up. He's going to put up the Mount Stewart. And Marius is... oh, I see. It passed. So Cosette was forced to buy it. Then John put up the Surrey, and Marius passed on it, was forced to pass on it, and Cosette is going to take that. Marius is then forced to put up the Surrey, and sorry, it gets confusing when they're auto-passing like this. So the Surrey goes to Cosette, Marius puts up the Charlottetown, and Cosette was unable to bid on it. That's bad news for them. So Jean will take that, I assume. and he actually passes on it. That's interesting. I wonder why he didn't want that for face, or not face, I guess 85. So Marius actually gets a pretty good peer share for just 80 bucks. Okay. And then Cassette is not going to have any cash, so this should be going to Jean, and Jean gets the Summerside. Okay. Sorry, I know it gets a little clunky with those last peer shares when people don't have enough money. It just jumps ahead in the log, and I have to kind of parse what's going on. All right, that leaves Marius first in the stock round. The first stock round here is usually not that all exciting. People don't really have that much cash. The question is whether or not someone, um, is able to float the short line or not. Doesn't look like that's going to be happening here. We'll see. Cossette's passing, and Jean passes as well, so that should leave Marius with priority. All right, Albertson's first up. And probably looking to create a loop for themselves with the city here, and may even potentially drop an early token here since he's going to be stuck running 2 trains. Could run a fair number of 2 trains with this track and hitting these dits. We'll have to see if that's how he wants to play it. It's decent early game revenue, but this company just struggles in the late game. So buys a single 2 train and may just sit and build tracks slowly on a single 2 train, let other players push trains. I believe, is Jean the Union Bank company? Is not. That is Marius. Okay. So the downside of not buying and pushing trains is that if you're not the Union Bank, you're probably going to lose if the game goes late. All right. Pierre is up and chooses to build out of the Summerside. And let's just look here. Pierre is Cosette, owned by Cosette right now. So that is not one of the peer companies she owns. Maybe hoping to incentivize Jean or someone floating one of Jean's peer shares so that she gets a higher percentage of the revenue and then can get a better location later in the game. I don't know. That would be the way I would think of it, at least. If you're splitting the presidency with someone, you want to incentivize them losing their shares, and then you can take a better starting location for the peer later on. Buys a 2, and we are into stock round 2. Marius, not enough money. Cosette is going to float the Georgetown, and Jean is going to buy an Alberton, just securing their presidency. Looks like Marius is still passing, and priority will remain the same. Alberton's back up, creating that loop, actually paying the $20 fee for the double track lay. A little bit interesting that they're doing that after having only bought a single 2 train. It's going to run it and neglects to buy any more trains. I don't know. What's the rush here of laying that track if you're just running a single 2 train? I would have thought they would have been happy to just slow roll it. Maybe they're hoping that the GT buys a bunch of trains and they can buy longer trains for later. It's possible. Even if they buy just one, the Alberton should have no trouble buying into the 3s. I don't know. It's just kind of, I'm getting mixed messages from this, right? You don't buy any trains and then you are pushing track. We'll see what happens. Georgetown first operation, laying towards the west. Peaks can be a kind of important choke. And just this, I don't know what the term for this would be, but this arc of track here, it's important to get control or some tokens down here because this oftentimes will cut off runs later in the game from these eastern offboards to the western part of the map. Hunter River can also be a pretty important choke. And then, of course, Charlottetown and Mount Stewart's home locations are important. So there's kind of different ranks of choke points. So heading west is usually important or high yield. Georgetown buys it too. Actually pushes through all these trains. So I guess the Alberton player is kind of happy with that. The game's not slowing down. They have some decent track now, and they're going to be able to buy later ranks of trains. I assume Cosette is doing this because Pier is limited on the number of trains they can buy, but they can buy trains from their fellow company, so maybe hoping to run the Pier kind of hot. I'm not a huge fan of that strategy in general. I think the Pier, generally speaking, just wants to shuffle cash into your actual companies, especially if you're 50-50 split with someone. But maybe that's what we'll see. Maybe they bought a bunch of trains just so they can shuffle them over. Pier is up. It's going to continue to lay out of Summerside and runs its 2 for 50, withholds it. Okay. and buys the train for a bunch of cash. Makes sense. Okay, so they are taking a pretty standard approach to the peer, it looks like. Stock round 3 shuffles all the cash out of the peer, actually, not just staying with the 2 train. And Marius is up, buys the Georgetown. Decent number of, oh, sorry, just walking back for a second, does actually not buy from the GT, is going to buy from the depot. So it didn't shuffle all the cash into Georgetown. Anyway, Marius is going to buy the Georgetown, 3 trains, reasonable expectation that it will be a profitable investment. Cosette is going to exchange and actually buy a, not buy, but obtain a share of the GT as a result. That does make the Charlottetown a little bit more attractive float. It doesn't look like she's going to be going early in the next stock round, and there may very well be floats in the next stock round, so not entirely sure about that. And then John is without cash for shares and could, in theory, exchange here. The revenue of the Georgetown is almost certainly going to be higher than the revenue from the private. However, if he passes here, he'll be going first and could exchange afterwards, sell his shares, and then potentially float something. This is not the Union Bank player, so maybe interested in floating another company. Could also potentially dump Alberton. Would be a hard dump with so much cash in his treasury. Okay, well, we'll see. I think I would pass here and keep priority, keep my options open. The first tranche here only has a single opening, so priority here could be pretty important because nobody else is going to be able to float a company. Passes. Marius is going to sell, maybe worried about the dump. And Union Bank is going to buy a share. Okay. Buys it from the GT. Cosette's passing, Jean passes, and John should have priority again. He does. Okay. It's always attractive to get shares into the Union Bank since they don't count against your cert limit. So you want to start racking these shares up early since you can only buy one a game. Do need to be a little bit careful about putting a bunch of your liquidity and net worth into the Union Bank too early, since you can potentially stunt your growth in your personal treasury, and then you have a ton of cash in the Union Bank in the late game. But since you can only buy one share ever during the stock round with the Union Bank, a lot of that cash is just stagnant, and you lose the ability to kind of compound interest, so to speak. All right, Alberton's up, single 2 train, laying towards the east, not connecting with the offboard. Would need a pretty long train to take advantage of that anyways, so reasonable just to run the 2H for these dits. Runs for 40, and is he going to buy some trains now? Probably should. Buys the 4H, we're into green. Georgetown could just upgrade and run into all these dits with its 3 trains. Alternatively, could double lay into peaks, and that would be reasonable. Could run all of its trains if it tokened in peaks as well. Peaks is an interesting tile because it actually gets less expensive when it gets upgraded, and it's only a single hole, but then it upgrades to a double hole. So it's like kind of a tension there. Do you want to run for more revenue, or do you want to open up runs for your company if someone else has already tokened there? Obviously, Cosette's under no incentive to upgrade peaks as it stands. It does look like she's going to double lay and tokens and peaks. That's generally speaking a worthwhile token. So runs all 3 trains for 110 and has a good amount of the company still in the market and exchange. So, well, actually, the exchange shares aren't doing much for her, but the market shares, of course, are helpful for the GT. Buys a 4H, now is train locked. I imagine we're going to see some more shuffling here. Maybe wants to just continue with holding on the pier, run all 3 trains, and then buy a train over in the second operating round. Or sorry, just here, I guess. Going to upgrade Wellington and can run all of its trains. Running for 140, that's pretty good. Imagine we'll see it withhold. Does. Going to buy a train out of the GT for 220. Very nice. And we are into stock round 4. All right, so Jean is up now and doesn't have any dumps. Really doesn't have cash for a float either. Suppose we could see an exchange for some quick cash. But yeah, going to be hard to float. Probably see a little bit of a stall here. So exchanges, everybody's making a run on the Georgetown. Marius buying that as well. The company's almost sold out. And Jean does exchange. So he's going to lose priority here. Cosette passing, Marius passing, and Jean passing. So that didn't work out very nicely for Jean, I wouldn't say. Does get it some extra shares, but is probably a little bit behind because this Alberton is really not running for much compared to the Georgetown, and he's got 3 shares of that compared to everybody else having 1 or none. Let's see if he completes the link up with the offboard or if he continues to head east. Gonna upgrade Alberton. All right, can double tap that, fair enough. Runs for 100, pays it, buys a 4, could buy a 5 here, and does, so the 2s won't be rusting again. Pier doesn't really care that much about it. Doesn't affect the Georgetown, doesn't look like. Georgetown upgrades Georgetown. It's home. And it's going to run 3 trains for 130. And is interestingly giving itself runs up to the north instead of hitting the double O or the DIT. Definitely a better long-term play to head north than to just take the extra $40 short-term of the 3rd run. Okay. Or actually, in this case, I guess it would only be $10 extra since he ran all 3 trains. Buys a 5, and the pier is up. Still has a train. Is going to lay from Mount Stewart. So really just spreading the love, laying track throughout the map, not trying to overly favor any of the companies. It's going to run for 60 and withholds. Second round in the set is heading down towards the DITs here, I assume. And is going to run 3 trains for 180. Finally getting some decent revenue, and does have half of that revenue going to the market, so pretty good. 180 and not going to buy a train. Georgetown. Starting to really lock down these potential chokes for later in the game. May not token this nameless city just yet, but would not be unreasonable to at some point, especially if they want to split. So could token here, then split and take peaks and double token peaks in this track here. That could be pretty potentially powerful. Not going to token it for now, and running 4 trains for 210, pretty good. Withholds it, and okay, not a huge fan of withholds in this game. The trains are generally speaking pretty cheap, and if you keep running to the right, splitting will oftentimes replenish your treasury. But that, in that light, makes sense. So withholds gets 100% of the revenue by buying in the Hunslet. Now that revenue from the private will be going to the company. They have a lot of liquidity coming into the stock round. Do they have priority in the stock round? They do. Yeah, and then they don't have to worry about falling back when trains rust. Really nice. Okay. Spoke too soon about the withhold. Pier's up. Upgrading Summerside, runs its 3 for 70, withholds it, and presumably is going to shuffle out of the GT again. And it does. Okay. Yeah. So I got to say, I mean, the Pier, I'm not a huge fan of the Pier, but when you have another company and you're able to just withhold on it, get 100% of that revenue, $80 guaranteed each round, and just pump money into your real company, it's pretty good. And especially when you think about it that people have to be invested in the Pier. So if you can control it and then take advantage of it, and everyone else is just, stuck paying $80 for these shares with no revenue the entire game from them, that's kind of a double whammy. It really is not a very good situation for Marius and Jean to be invested in the Pier when this is happening. All right, Cosette has a ton of money and is going to be floating something. We'll see what they pick. Looking at the map here, they have the Charlottetown. They may take the Mount Stewart. Is that a Pier share that they have? It is. So they'd lose control of the Pier if they did that. That may be enough incentive not to do it, and instead they may take the Charlottetown. We'll see. I think it's probably one of those 2 companies. Sells a GT, doesn't have to worry about losing it, and takes the Mount Stewart. Okay. So it's going to lose control of the pier here. That's a little bit of a bummer. And it will be going to Jean, who can start pumping cash into Alberton with it. All right. Marius is going to buy a Mount Stewart with the Union Bank, racking up those shares. Jean is buying the Alberton. Okay. Everybody is buying the Mount Stewart that's almost floated. Jean, what did Jean buy? Jean is passing. Okay. And then the Mount Stewart is floated, so Cosette lost control of the pier. Marius is going to pass. Jean passing. Cosette might as well spend the cash. Buys an Alberton and should be done at this point unless they want to go back for, well, they could buy another Mount Stewart. Wouldn't be unreasonable. And it looks like they do not. All right, so Jean ends up with priority, and he and Marius will be able to float in the next stock round if they wish. The next tranche will open. Alberton heading down towards the Summerside. So perhaps Jean is going to be looking to float the Summerside. He could. And if the Summerside floats, Cosette will get back the pier. So this may have been just a very temporary swap. Maybe Cosette saw that happening and wasn't too worried about losing the pier for 2 operating rounds. All right, running 3 trains for 210. We see a token down here on Summerside. I don't find this city to be all that exciting. It is a nice way of getting into these offboards, and these can be nice for the late game. So if the Alberton's able to pick up a D train, it's going to be able to snag, this offboard, this, and then this high value offboard at the end. But that's far ways off, so we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. Gonna pay it. Georgetown's up, laying towards the Mount Stewart, and actually splitting the difference, heading towards the Mount Stewart and then also Surrey. But that does put the Mount Stewart 1 track lay away from linking up, so maybe that was the goal. Runs its trains for 200, pays it, and Mount Stewart's now up, links up with the track laid by the Georgetown. And are they going to push through into the 6s? Who has the 3s? Yeah, probably. Oh, this is going to be nice for Cosette. They dump the pier right when the trains are going to rust, and then pick it up back in the next stock round, probably. Nice. All right. Buys a 5 and a 6. All right. And pier is up. No trains for him, and is going to do nothing. Yeah, literally. Well, it lays a track. All right. That doesn't buy any trains, doesn't shuffle any cash. I imagine we'll see it shuffle a train out of the Alberton at the end of this stock round. Alberton heading east still. And we'll see if he's looking to head towards the offboard or if he's trying to loop back around and continue heading east through all these dits. Runs for 220, pays it, and buys a 6. Georgetown, just 2 trains now, upgrades Mount Stewart, gets a nice token. Georgetown's looking pretty good for the late game at this point. And is going to buy the 2+. Okay. 4 trains are rusting. And that affects the Alberton a lot more than it affects the Georgetown, particularly because the Georgetown got to run its train. Of course, the Alberton did as well, but Alberton is going to be in a little bit of trouble here as this train rush accelerates, particularly if it starts trying to buy trains over into the pier. It may struggle to have good runs in the next stock round. We'll see how they navigate that. Mount Stewart laying towards the west. We'll see where they're heading. I guess hoping to get into that offboard that we were discussing before the Alberton lays a bunch of tragic track and locks them out. Runs 2 trains for 130, not as nice of revenue, and is going to buy a 2+. So is almost out of cash here, and needs to worry a little bit about affording some permanent trains. If 2 new companies float here, this 5 is definitely gone, and the 6 may well be gone pretty early as well. 2+ is going to stick around for a while, but yeah, the Mount Stewart is going to probably have to withhold a little bit at some point. or one of the companies will have to split. Here, 160 bucks in his treasury now, links up with the offboard and doesn't do much. Does buy a train out of the Alberton, so treasury is looking a little bit healthier. And we'll see who ends up with this pier now. Pier is probably going to be trainless again, because I don't think this 5 train is going to get to run. I imagine 2 companies are going to float. These 2s are going to evaporate, and that first 3 is going to come out. All right, so Jean is selling out and will float the Summerside. No surprises there. Has laid himself a bunch of track with the Alberton for it. Marius is also selling out and will be starting the Charlottetown with the Union Bank. So this is very powerful. Charlottetown's a very good company. He gets 2 shares into the Union Bank when he's usually limited to 3 or limited to 1 per operating round. Yeah, that's really nice for Marius. Usually you don't want to float companies with or par companies with the Union Bank because somebody can steal it from you and then take all the cash out and dump it back on the Union Bank since the Union Bank can never sell shares. But in this case, Marius controls the Charlottetown peer share. So when this floats, he will be able to get that share into his personal treasury and defend the presidency of the Charlottetown if anybody were to contest it. I may not have explained that very well, but bottom line is do not float a company with the Union Bank unless you have that peer share and are able to buy shares with your own cash. All right, Cosette buying the GT. I think the other players kind of recognize this blocker that Marius has, so they're not even going to try and contest the Charlottetown, which would just be a waste of time. Jean buying the Summerside, Marius continuing to float, Cosette, Jean, Georgetown. Jean almost floated, Marius keeping right on course with them. Cosette is going to give the Summerside a little bit of help and buy a share there. Jean has now floated it. Pier goes back to Cosette, but is going to be trainless, just like the company that she dumped on Jean. Marius is now the president of Charlottetown from the Union Bank, and once this floats, he'll get another share as well. MS is max invested by Cosette. She's out of cash. Jean may end up actually with priority here. Priority at this point is probably the least important that it's going to be in the game because the 3 tranches are going to open up. So 3-player game, everyone's going to get to float a company if they want. Not that priority is not important. It still allows you to take the action first, your choice of company first, sells first, that kind of thing. But compared to early in the game where only 2 players were going to get to float or only 1 player was going to get to float, much less, I guess, consequential. Jean is going to sell a Georgetown and buy a Mount Stewart. Okay, so not interested in priority. Marius also buying a Mount Stewart. So that's floating up. We'll see if anybody sells. Cosette gets priority. Jean passing Marius. 1 more share for him on the Charlottetown, which he takes. And the pier is now 50-50 split between these 2 players, Cosette and Jean. No splits yet, so probably going to be seeing the pier go away. Enough companies need to split that you can't float all the pier shares for it to survive into the late game, but I don't think we're going to be seeing that here. Late game pier is situationally good. If you have a spare train and you can run it with a decent route from the pier, you do get 100% of the revenue, but more often than not, it ends up being a dead share in your portfolio. So just be careful. You may want to kill the pier if you are the president. All right, Alberton. Not sure what this track's about. There is a straight track that will eventually upgrade here and potentially allow him to bypass some of these dits into the offboard. So maybe that's what he's gunning for. Runs the 6 train and runs for 90. He's going to pay it. Buys the 2. Summerside. That is Jean's other company. Probably buys a 2 and a 3 here to rust everybody else's trains, if I had to guess. Okay, buys the 2 and the 3. 5 trains rust. Bad news for the Georgetown and the Mount Stewart. The Charlottetown is up. powerhouse of a company. Bad track right now, but it doesn't take much for it to get good track. I think Cosette is going to really have to be on the ball here with tragic track and nasty tokens to keep the Charlottetown down. Heading towards Belfast, maybe hoping to link up with the Murray River or just get into the offboard. Not much that Cosette can do about either of those things. Buys a 3, Mount Stewart, heading west still, and is going to run for 150 with holding. And buys the, is that the last 3 plus? It is. So 4 pluses are going to be coming out. These 2 pluses, or sorry, the 6s are going to rust first. And who has 6s? Mount Stewart does, Alberton does, and the Georgetown doesn't care because they have the Hunslet, but the Hunslet's going to be going away very shortly. So may not actually see them take advantage of that purchase ability. So buys the 6, Hunslet goes away, and now is upgrading into Brown. Runs 2 trains for 270, decent revenue. And are they going to have to withhold here because they have 2 companies and staring down the gun of permanent trains? They may well have to. This company's pretty much broke. They have halfway of a permanent train on the Georgetown, and this 4 plus is going to last for a while. There is a guaranteed run on it. Yeah, they might have to look at withholding. Their net worth is not really that high that they can, reliably split for a permanent train. Let's see what they do. They pay it for now. Piers up, no trains, laying the Surrey, and probably going to be just laying friendly track with the Georgetown and the Mount Stewart. Jean, Alberton, upgrading Summerside. Runs for 160, pays it. Georgetown, upgrading his home, 300, and are they going to withhold ever? Paying it again. Summerside, just upgrading Alberton. Revenues are steadily climbing. First run for the Charlottetown. Can get into the offboard down south here, and is not going to do that for now. So running for just 70, not the greatest. And is going to pay it. Mount Stewart upgrades Peaks. Interesting. Does improve its runs since it has plus trains, so it can take advantage of these dits. We'll see where it wants to token. Cosette has priority, so if she takes the Surrey, she will have basically locked down this northeastern corner of the map. 3 companies may not want to token in Georgetown since all 3 of her companies are going to be able to run around here. Yeah, so I guess it's just setting up for late game runs here. That's pretty nice. Pretty good synergy. Runs for 220. Pier is done. Gonna lay a track and probably never run again for the rest of the game. Cosette, I assume we're going to be seeing a Surrey float and is going to par it as high as they can, which unfortunately in this game is not very high in the late game. I imagine we'll see another par from Jean as well. The last peer company is the Murray River. That doesn't really synergize at all with his other companies. Could split one of his companies. And you know what? High revenue on the Alberton may be worth thinking about. I don't think he would lose the presidency. He would go down to 2 shares, but he could buy a 3rd one. So probably would be safe to split this. And that might be the better move as opposed to floating the Murray River. Yeah. The unfortunate part about splitting the Alberton is you'd have to give away this token, which would cut the access of the Alberton to this offboard. But then his new company would have the access and could run through this untokened city. So I think it's viable. Let's see what he does. He does split Alberton, and he's going to take the Hunter River branch. Okay. Pars it for 65. And what's he going to do in terms of the assets of this company? Doesn't transfer any trains, and now has, potentially 2 healthy treasuries, permanent train in the Hunter River, and just by buying 2 shares here, he'll be fine for permanent trains in the Alberton as well. This is why I like just moving right in this game. I think it's, a pretty easy rescue mechanism. The other players could try and contest this and pressure both of his presidencies. So, for instance, if Marius buys, an Alberton share and then Cosette starts pressuring for the Hunter River branch, John is going to have to pick and choose. I don't think we're going to see that. I mean, Cosette has already floated the Surrey. I don't know if we're going to see them coordinate to split Jean, but it is possible. Something to think about. Marius is going to float the Murray River. I think Jean's probably a-okay with this. He doesn't really want this dead peer share eating up his cert limit. It is good for Marius as well. It can coordinate with his Charlottetown a little bit. We haven't really been looking at net worth at all. Cosette is in the lead ahead of Marius, and then Jean is in third place. So that's bad news for Jean. I'm not that surprised by this, given that he's the Alberton president, and that's just kind of a dead company most of the time. So I think that's probably not unexpected. Cosette's happy to be ahead of the Union Bank player, but the Union Bank really shines in like the last operating set when you're 7 shares ahead of everybody else. So I don't know if a $150 buffer is going to be enough. Marius might still be able to take this. It really is going to depend how the permanent trains break. If Marius has to go into pocket and sell a bunch of shares for a permanent train, um, that would certainly be problematic. But with just 2 presidencies, one of them with a pretty full treasury, that seems pretty unlikely. So might be danger zone for Cosette and Jean. They got to really push trains here and make sure the D train comes out in this operating set, or else they're going to be definitely losing. They might just lose anyways. Cosette is buying the Surrey. Jean, the selling the MS and buying the Alberton, okay, to capitalize that company. Marius is going to sell his own Charlottetown and start working on the Murray River. Everyone's buying their own companies, Cosette. And actually, having said that, Jean is going to detour and not float the Hunter River branch and not work on capitalizing the Alberton either. Marius is buying the Murray River, almost floated there. Cosette, Surrey. Jean buying and selling the GT, just dumping it down a little bit. And then we'll work on floating the Hunter River branch. One thing that I haven't talked about, but should we be wondering about Marius's decision to float the Murray River here? If only 2 companies float here, are we really going to see a D train come out in the next set of operating rounds? The other players would really have to push for it if the Charlottetown's not pushing trains, and if the Murray River didn't float. I don't think the other players have the cash to float it if Marius doesn't, and he's the Union Bank player, so could consider just paying shares, and then just sitting and letting the game stall. Uh, I mean, I think if the game goes 2 more operating rounds, like if we get into operating round 9, I think Marius is basically guaranteed to win. His share advantage will just be too huge. Um, but I think we're pretty likely to get into operating round 9 if the Murray River doesn't float here. And I'm not sure the other players could really force it. And if they did force it, it'd be pretty painful because they're buying, non-D trains. Okay, well, we'll see. Union Bank is going to buy a share, just slowly ranking up these free cert limit shares. Cosette, on the other hand, is nearing her cert limit, 2 shares left. Jean trailing the other players quite heavily in terms of shares. Buying the Hunter River branch, still not floated. Marius is now floated on the Murray River. The pier is a thing of the past. Cosette buys the Charlottetown. Jean, Hunter River branch, 1 more share there. Marius is going to sell a Mount Stewart and buy the Surrey. Cosette now share locked with the Murray River. Jean, last share for him. Actually, not last share. He still has exactly enough for the Hunter River branch. Good. And he's going to trash the Charlottetown. Not the most consequential action. Buys the Hunter River. And everyone passes. Okay. So we'll see if these players are able to push into the D trains. They really need to if they don't want to just get run over. Alberton upgrades Tignish. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not. 180 for the Alberton. Pays it Georgetown. Upgrades Surrey. Also not sure of the pronunciation of that one, as come to think of it. Running a 4 train, not able to hit the offboard, unfortunately for them. Running for a 330. And why are they not able to hit the offboard? Is that... It's a 3 plus. No, it's a 2 plus. Okay, fair enough. Running for 330. Summerside. Upgrading Tignish again. And going to run for 380 with holding. Looks like we're having a little bit of a stall here on the 4 plus. Nobody wants to buy this, just waiting for the permanent trains. Having said that, this Summerside does buy the 4 plus. Okay. Guaranteed run there, so not the worst. If the D train comes out here, we'll still get some value there. Surrey first operation, upgrading for the loop, and is going to buy a train out of the Mount Stewart, and then buys the first 7, I assume. Yes. We'll see where these gray tiles end up. Hunter River Branch is doing nothing and going to buy a 7, presumably. Does. Yeah, so this is problematic, right? If you're running a 7 train, you kind of want to be in a more compact area of the map. Running your 7 train and hitting all these stupid dits all over the place, not the most attractive. I think the Alberton and the Summerside in particular would have hoped for D trains. A 7 train, over here in the east, maybe you can avoid some of these dits and just hit the offboards and higher revenue locations. All right, Murray River, first operation, is going to buy a 7. Mount Stewart, going to be shy of a permanent train, it looks like. May shuffle that cash around. Let's just look at Cosette's portfolio here. Unfortunately, only has 1 train in all of its companies, so shuffling trains is going to lose them a run. Probably would rather fall back on the Mount Stewart than the Georgetown. The share appreciation is going to be better on the Georgetown than it will on the Mount Stewart. We'll see what they decide. I guess it also depends which company they want the D train in. The Mount Stewart and the Georgetown track is very similar. They have basically the same routes. So I guess they don't care that much where the D train ends up. Upgrades peaks. Needs to be a little bit careful about opening up the track into Charlottetown here. Charlottetown could upgrade and then lay track into peaks and cut their runs. That would be a nightmare for Cosette. Runs for 160, does withhold, and buys. So it has to withhold and shuffle a train. That's kind of rough. All right. Charlottetown heading to link up with the Murray River and actually puts themselves out of the permanent train money, but with these market shares should still be able to buy it without withholding. So Pay's last 7 train is off the market. That leaves the Alberton to out of pocket a D train. Good news for the other players. Looks like the game will be ending in operating around 8. So they will have to see if they can eke out a victory against the Union Bank here. And he does end up with a D train in the Alberton. Oh boy, but this is exactly what we're talking about. The Alberton's going to have the D train, but it got cut with the split. So it can't hit these offboards. So that's $130 of revenue lost. Would have much rather had the D train, I'm sure, in the Hunter River branch or even the Summerside than the Alberton. That's a bummer. Especially when he only owns 30% of this company. Yeah, he probably have to shuffle it out of the Alberton and just eat the loss of revenue. It's painful to do, but I think it's going to be better. All right, so D train's out. GT should have no trouble buying a D train as well. Gray company comes over here in the east, and he has exclusive control of this track, so he's the only one that's going to be taking advantage of this $70 revenue, at least for the foreseeable future. I think while it's attractive to throw away the X share or X tile, since there's only one of them, you do want to, if you're this player, start looking at setting up tragic track and blocks so that the Charlottetown and the Murray River cannot get into your track. You got to look at the most likely points of attack. So I'm looking at this track right here and saying, you got to throw down some track here and upgrade it so that the Charlottetown has no chance of getting through here. All right, buys the D. The 4 plus is on the way out. We'll have a good run this turn at least. 270. pays it and is going to be shy of a D train, going to have to out of pocket that. So at least the S does end up with a D train. That'll be a nice run, but a real bummer again that the Alberton did not, or the Alberton ended up with a D train and not the Hunter River. Charlottetown, let's see what he's up to. Upgrading Murray River, lost out on the X upgrade, and runs for just 190. Really not that good. Okay, Surrey, upgrading Surrey and running for 280. Pretty nice. Hunter River Branch, 240, paying it out. Murray River upgrading Charlottetown. So now this is what I'm a little bit worried about. They've got 2 track points to get into peaks here. They have token money on Murray River, don't have the token money on Charlottetown just yet, but if either one of these companies gets in here and tokens in Surrey, for instance, that is going to be real bad news for Cosette. So this is a big priority right here, I think, for Cosette. They really need to make sure that that track gets shut down. And they need to do it with the Mount Stewart, since the other companies don't have money. So we'll see if operating order works out for them. They should be able to lay it with Mount Stewart and then upgrade it with Georgetown. Unfortunately, I find that blocking people with track in this game is challenging. It's just the tile roster in brown opens up a fair amount, and sometimes they're able to weasel the way in. So this may be a lost cause, but I think that they need to be acutely aware of this threat. All right. Token in Charlottetown. So that actually is pretty reassuring if you're Cosette, since they just put their upgrade money into this token. So now they actually can't lay that track for another operating round. Gives you some breathing room. Paying for 200, Mount Stewart. Okay, let's see what happens here. Upgrading that city, and then has to go pretty deep into pocket for the D train. That's bad news. It's probably game for Cosette. Net worth is 1,700 versus Marius, Union Bank player, 22,000 already. Everybody has their permanent trains, and she leads by 3 shares currently. But I've seen the Union Bank player just walk away, with games just based on share density too many times to be confident that these runs from Cosette are going to do much for her. We'll see. All right, final operating round in 8. Marius is up, Jean is up on the Alberton. This is going to be a little bit of a disappointing run. Just 310, pays it. Georgetown. This will be a pretty good run. Doesn't have cash for this track, but neither does Marius. Maybe I'm making too much of this, but this would be something that would be keeping me up at night if I was playing an async game, this link up opportunity. And is actually going to kind of help Marius get there. I guess it blocks Marius from heading west. That's a consideration. All right, we'll see where they're going with this. Runs for 430, that's pretty nice. Summerside, this will be a nice run. 450, okay, pays it. Charlottetown, 7 train, upgrading Charlottetown. That will also upgrade to Grace shortly. And runs for 290. There is some contention here for the scary track. It can either be 2 or 3 holes. Well, I guess the gray one. Sorry, the gray one is always going to be 3. But they did upgrade the brown to be 2 holes rather than 3. So maybe that's why Cosette was heading towards the Charlottetown, was so that they could get a run through this pier high revenue center. No real rush to do that, though. I mean, it's going to happen eventually. And really, Marius might do it for you if you give him long enough. All right. Surrey is going to lay themselves a bypass of this track. They're going to hope for the straight upgrade here. I think Jean is also looking for that track, so may lose out to it. We'll see. Runs for 290. Hunter River Branch. Actually not going to lay any track at all. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, this track and this track are mirror images, so they're not... are they mirror images? No, they are the same. So they are competing for that track. So I wonder why he's not laying any track here. All right, 240. pays it. Mary River gets the Charlottetown upgrade. This can be really nice for the D runs of Cosette. Does the Mount Stewart have a D train? It should, right? It does. So that's going to be a nasty D run because it's going to run from this offboard all the way down into this offboard. That's really nice. I don't think it's going to be enough to get them back in the game, though. We'll see. Runs for 660. That is pretty darn nice, especially when only 20% of that is going outside of either the company or your personal treasury. That also gives her cash for this track if they need it. I think all the companies are going to have that cash now, though. Yeah, literally all of them. So it's going to come down to operating order. And it looks like, unfortunately, even though Georgetown's going to operate first, Cosette's not going to have the track points to block the Charlottetown from getting in. Yeah, so I think this is probably game over because she's not going to be able to defend her runs. All right, 660, really nice revenue, but we may only see that one more time, or we actually may never see that again because I think the tokens are going to start flying here. Looking at the net worth here, Marius and Cosette are neck and neck, but Cosette is cert locked, and Marius has 8 shares to buy, 9 if you count the Union Bank, so that's going to be pretty devastating. Jean is in 3rd place, and I expect will remain there. Stock round is going to be buying a bunch of shares. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about here. Just buy as many shares as you can. Alberton, for some reason, is trainless. I think this is what we were talking about, where he recognizes that the D train in Alberton is not very good. So he's going to put it in the Hunter River branch instead, and then force buy the Alberton. So if you're the other players, or even Jean here, you don't want to invest in the Alberton. Its run's not going to be good. You're looking at the Hunter River branch. That's going to be a monster. Mount Stewart also attractive. So, all right. Mount Stewart's going off. Cosette can't buy that. Should probably look for the Hunter River, and is going to sell the Surrey. Okay. Oh, she was cert locked. Okay, fair enough. Buys the Hunter River. Very reasonable. Sean is going to buy the Mount Stewart. That's sold out. Merritt should be going for the Hunter River. Does. Cosette's going to snag another share of that, I assume. Sells out of the Charlotte. And that company's now sold out. So the 2 really attractive companies have sold out. Georgetown's looking pretty good. So is the Summerside. Jean can't buy Summerside, so we'll buy Georgetown. Marius will buy. I thought that company was sold out. Huh. Okay, I messed up. There was another Hunter River branch, so that's really bad news for Cosette. She was probably hoping that Marius would not get as many shares there as she did. She picks up her last share on the Summerside. Jean is going to buy a Georgetown. Marius buys the Summerside, and we should be nearing the end here in terms of good shares. Jean gets a Murray River, Marius, Murray River. And we're just going to see the rest of the kind of crappy shares getting bought up now. Marius could, in theory, take control of the Alberton, but for what reason, really? It would allow him another share, but he doesn't need an extra share density. Might as well just buy paying shares instead of the Alberton shares. And it looks like everyone is at their cert limit. So we pass into 8.1. Let's look at the revenues in the last stock round, although there's been a bunch of shares, or last operating round, there's been a bunch of shares since then. Cosette was running for 200 ahead of Marius. That is just not going to cut it. So Marius should be taking this game. He's already in the lead and has a share lead of 6 on everybody else. Yeah, that's game. So let's just look at the revenue here. Before we look at the revenue, we'll look at the tokens. It looks like Marius got exactly what we were worried about. He got the tokens in Georgetown. That cuts the runs of all these companies. Looks like Cosette didn't even try and defend it since there's just a single gentle curve here. So that's just the nail in the coffin. Marius's net worth is, or revenue is, trailing Cosette's by just a little bit, but is only $20 behind. And now that Cosette's runs are presumably going to be much worse, should be able to take this game. So 8.3, the revenue of Marius exceeds that of Cosette's. He's now in the lead, and I expect we'll see him just take the game. All right, so they win by a fairly narrow margin, actually. Is it $99? Wow. So closer than I was expecting, to be honest. Cosette managed to hang on pretty well there. I think this track is probably the difference maker, right? In such a close game, if Cosette's runs aren't cut and she's able to just run all over the board, um, as she did with the MS in the last stock round or last operating round, then that should be more than enough to make up a $90 difference. Anyway, nicely played game. The Union Bank wins again. I think the Union Bank, in my experience, is winning quite a bit. So not too surprised to see that. Anyway, well played to these players. Always enjoy a good game of the Old Prince. And that concludes the commentary. Um, just as a end note to this video, I just want to give everyone an update on the channel. I don't want to detract from this game, but as many of you have noticed, the channel is down for about a month and a half. There's been a pretty large lapse in uploads, and that's for two reasons. The most important one is that the channel actually got banned by Google or YouTube for, quote, scam, spam, and deceptive practices, which is crazy. The channel's not monetized. I never asked anybody for any money. We're not spamming videos on any, on any social media. We aren't spamming comments. So just a really absurd accusation to lose the channel over. And that really kind of cast a pall on the channel from my perspective for, a good time. The channel was totally inaccessible for a full month. And, you spend a lot of time on something like this channel, making the videos, editing the videos, etc. And to have that all just evaporate is just really a splash of cold water on the hobby. Really lost interest in uploading videos for a while because of that. The channel was obviously reinstated after I contested. There was no explanation from Google about what had happened. So it's an error on their end, very unprofessional, but there's nothing I can do about it other than say my piece now in this video. So that was reason number one, and reason number two was just that I had some life events going on, so just didn't really have time to make videos. I do think the channel will continue for the foreseeable future, and what that will look like just really depends on my motivation. I like doing the commentary, I like doing the data analysis, so we'll try and keep that up. But the uploads may be a little less frequent for the time being. We'll see how much time I have. So anyway, just wanted to put a brief note on the channel about that. Many people were aware of the circumstances from conversations on Discord, but for those of you that aren't on Discord but are subscribed to the channel, that's what was going on. And yeah, that's it. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll be back with additional commentary in the future.